We're hearing what everybody else is hearing right now. Seems like a done deal, pending physicals. One Met official told me where there's smoke, there's fire. And local time at 2:30 every day, Assistant General Manager John Ricco had been meeting with the media. He postponed that media availability moments ago. So, again, it certainly does seem like something is brewing, and that something is Neil Walker to the Mets. So, Andy, I know we just heard from everybody else, but let's start with you. Your thoughts on this deal for the Mets?
Well, it's a very nice job covering for the loss of Ben Zobrist, who the Mets, of course, hoped to get last night. He went instead to the Cubs, so they had to pivot and do something else. It's not a slam dunk for the Mets in this regard. Fans are going, hey, John Niese, we've watched him mope around the mound for years. This is great. We get a real player for him. Yes, but Neil Walker's under control for 1 more year. John Niese is a left-handed pitcher under control for 3. I'm not saying I don't like this for the Mets, but I'm saying that is a steep price to pay, Steve, especially given how good Niese looked out of the bullpen in the World Series and the playoffs. He could have had a whole second life as a reliever that could be coming for him when the Mets have a need there. Having said all that, I like that they're replacing Daniel Murphy at second with a short-term guy. Allow Dilson Herrera, the young kid, a year to develop, and then see where Dilson is after the Neil Walker season. So I like that aspect of it. But let's be clear, they paid a price.
Like you were kind of mentioning, there's 2 aspects here. There's the lack of pitching depth now, which we'll get into in a second, and there's the new second baseman in place of Daniel Murphy, who was a very productive player, obviously, for the Mets for a number of years. When you look at it, how much of a dip is it just this 1 year, Murphy to Walker?
I think it's pretty good for the Mets, pretty equivalent. I mean, Walker's a guy who, as Anthony DiComo just said, a little more in line with the front office's philosophy. Murphy improved a lot this year and worked very hard, don't get me wrong. But he, as Anthony alluded to, was never a guy in line with that on-base philosophy. Walker with a 328 on base last year, so he's not exactly Johnny Damon either in terms of walking every time up. But that is a fit there. 16 home runs, not great platoon splits, obviously, but a player who will give you production at age 31 next year that you can plug right in there and think, okay, good, we got a guy during our win-now time.
And you do talk about the lack of a dip from Daniel Murphy to Neil Walker last season. If you look at the numbers, I mean, they're very, very comparable. Second baseman ranks in the National League. Neil Walker was second in the NL in RBIs. Murphy was first with 2 more RBIs. They were tied. I should say Neil Walker was tied for first in home runs with 16. Murphy had 14. The big difference, you can look at the strikeouts. Neil Walker struck out 72 more times last season than Murphy, who only struck out 38. But Walker, a guy who played 151 games, very durable player for the Mets. So we know where they are now at second base. What does this mean, Andy, for the shortstop position? Is this now, once again, Wilmer Flores' job?
Well, it'll be interesting to see, Steve, what they do with Flores. There are Mets people that are kind of over Flores and Tejada, and this is something I think that's some internal discussion is happening. Let's put it that way, verging on internal debate. Do you want to go forward with those guys? There's still money here that they didn't spend on Zobrist. Do you want to go get an Ian Desmond now? The Mets have always kind of shot that down, but there are people in that room who are interested in Ian Desmond, so we'll see how that discussion plays out. They could go in a lot of different directions here because they preserve their financial flexibility and added a bat. That's what's so nice about this. After losing Zobrist, it was like, where are they going to get that production? Where are they going to get that, say, that 16 home runs that they're getting from Neil Walker? Well, there you go. There it is, and you still have money to spend, so they could definitely turn and spend that at shortstop if they so choose. Remember, Flores can play third. He can be a guy that moves around a little bit. He can spell David Wright. Maybe you don't have to bring back a Kelly Johnson now. There's a lot of things in the mix that the Mets could still do and end up with a decent bench. Flores might be part of that.
And the financials are a key right here, as Anthony DiComo mentioned earlier as well. Neil Walker projected to make about $11 million, John Niese about 10, so that's kind of a wash right there. And we do know the Mets were willing to spend money on Ben Zobrist, so when you look at it beyond just a guy like Ian Desmond at shortstop, does this now maybe open up some avenues in the outfield or in the bullpen?
Well, my understanding, Steve, of both of those is that Mets have just been rolling along with the pursuit of outfielders like the names that we've mentioned on this set a million times, Gerardo Parra, maybe a Denard Span. So I'm not seeing them going in the Justin Upton, Jason Hayward category. In fact, I can say, I'm told, that they're not going in that category, and I'm sure you've heard the same. What I think they're going to do now, what this changes specifically is they need to find a back-end starting pitcher. You remember, Zach Wheeler is not coming back until July or August. It was a complicated Tommy John. There was stuff with his tendon going on. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. And Niese was going to plug that spot in the rotation until Wheeler came back. So maybe you bring back Bartolo Colon.
Who?
Bartolo Colon. The guy who takes his bat all the way to first base.
Is that what you've seen? I mean, does this open up the door for Big Bart to make his return to Flushing?
It could. There's a relationship there. They love what he brought to the clubhouse. He'll be considered among the pile of other number 5 type starting pitchers. We've seen Sandy Alderson do this most of his years here. He brings in Chris Young or Chris Capuano or whoever. They're looking for someone from that pile. Colon, who they've already met with his agents here in Nashville, Colon is a guy who they know and like. So you definitely think that door was always open. You have to think of it as a little more open today.
They know and like, and Bartolo Colon has expressed interest to the Mets that he is willing to come back, not just as a starting pitcher, as a reliever. So now this opens the door as that swing man. Bartolo Colon potentially coming back to Queens. We'll see how that story develops here in the next couple of days as well.